In 1846, three sisters, scribbling, arguing, marching round this table night after night, created three of the greatest novels in the English language. Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, and Agnes Grey were published within weeks of one another, immediately delighting and shocking the public.
One woman said about Jane Eyre that if it wasn't written by a man, then it must have been written by a sexual delinquent.
The novels are filled with unforgettable characters. Plain Jane, brooding Mr. Rochester, steadfast Agnes, and the tormented Heathcliff.
It feels as if you're putting yourself at risk just by opening the covers of a book.
The books seem to come out of nowhere, as did their authors, Charlotte, Emily and Anne Brontë. Three clergymen's daughters from the wilds of West Yorkshire. As three long-time Brontë fans, we want to find out how these sheltered young spinsters produced three immortal works so quickly. Can we discover the secrets of their creative genius by stepping into their lives, by being the Brontës?
I feel very comfortable in this. I'm very happy. It's sparking something deep within me.
What will we learn when we venture out into the windswept landscapes that inspired them?
Do not want to get lost on the moors. That's the spirit, Emily.
What does their sibling rivalry reveal?
It was kind of like an act of betrayal.
No, wait, Charlotte must have been scared.
What insights will we gain from sharing their household chores? And learning about their professional misadventures.
Anne Bronte's charges were being so unpleasant that she tied them to a table leg.
We'll even witness a Brontë wedding.
I will.
To find out how Charlotte, Emily and Anne Brontë tore open the tight-laced Victorian novel and won a place in the hearts of readers forever. In 1845, the three Brontë sisters were all living back home, here in Haworth in West Yorkshire. They were unemployed, unmarried and unhappy. Beneath the shy exterior of Charlotte, the oldest, lay a burning ambition, and she's long had a grip on my imagination.
One day when I was about 11 or 12, I took down a really heavy-looking volume from a high-up shelf with no pictures or anything in it. And it was called Jane Eyre. I knew it was the story of a girl. And once I started reading, I was just in that world. Her childhood, the brutal treatment of that boarding school, but it gave me nightmares. And I suppose when I was older, it was the passionate love affair, of course, with Mr. Rochester. Who's more romantic than Mr. Rochester? And I suppose that's something that's always intrigued me, that the fact it was this intensely shy, frail woman, Charlotte Brontë, who managed to create such a passionate book. I wonder where that came from.
The sisters wrote and grew up together, but had distinct personalities and styles. Emily Brontë drew on the supernatural and the Gothic for her dark family saga, Wuthering Heights. The book has been an inspiration for novelist Helen Oyeyemi ever since she read it as a teenager. But Emily herself remains something of a mystery.
Reading Wuthering Heights for the first time was one of the most intense experiences I've ever had while sitting still. You have no idea who or what on earth Emily Brontë might be. You just have this sense of a wild and singular imagination, this powerful mind. Her characters are so intense and go to such extremes. It seems as if there's nothing that they won't say or do.
Journalist Lucy Mangan is fascinated by the youngest Brontë sister, Anne, whose work was grounded in the social injustices of her day.
I've always loved Anne because, well, mainly because she's the underdog of the three sisters, and I mean, who doesn't love an underdog? She's the forgotten Brontë.
She was quieter than Charlotte and, frankly, less weird than Emily. And I think there's a sense of sort of, to the noisy and the weird, the spoils. And Anne hasn't quite had her due.
What I love about Anne is that she writes about real people. There's none of your gothic melodrama here. Her first book, Agnes Grey, is an absolutely unsparing look at the lot of an exploited governess. It's not exactly agitprop, but her approach is an almost campaigning one.
So I'm off to Haworth for the first time ever, and I'm really fascinated to try and get a sense of her and the rest of them in their natural habitat.
Anne, Emily and Charlotte wrote their first novels together in the dining room of their home, the parsonage at Haworth, where their father Patrick was the local clergyman.
Well, here we are.
Yeah.
Amazing. No, I can't quite believe we're actually in here.
Swim.
There's something, isn't there, about a place where writers have been. You get this whole atmosphere. Oh, look, Jane Eyre.
Guys, as if I needed any more confirmation that Emily Brontë was here. Here's,
What have you found?
Here's some graffiti. An E.
It would be Emily, wouldn't it?
It would.
Wuthering Heights for you.
I think this is Anne's writing slope. So if I may just hold Agnes
Anne and Emily
Grey over
together.
the place where it was written.
You're acting like it's a shrine.
It is a shrine, it is a shrine.
You can just imagine them here. It's just
Spurring each other on to greatness or having massive rows.
I'm a bit overwhelmed by how present they feel in this room.
They do feel present,
Yeah.
don't they? There is the spirit of the Brontes' past somehow around us.
Nonsense, Kearney. Nonsense.
There is.
Seeing the table where the sisters wrote and their personal effects has given us a taste of the Brontë magic. But it was magic conjured in the midst of a tragedy unfolding at the parsonage. The sisters weren't just crammed in here with their father. There was also a fourth Brontë sibling, their brother Branwell. In 1845, the one-time golden boy of the family was descending into alcoholism. Branwell used to write with the sisters, particularly Charlotte. He also painted the most famous picture of them, ominously painting himself out before the portrait was finished. Now, he was a shadow of his former self.
I just think it must have been so painful for Charlotte to see the disintegration of the brother she'd been so close to, and living with an addict like that brought real shame on the family. I mean, she didn't want to have visitors coming here to the parsonage. And I suppose it all really came to a head. It was a breaking point, really, on the night of the 31st of July, 1845, when she came back and she found him drunk right here. She wrote about it in a letter to a friend. She said he thought of nothing but stunning or drowning his distress of mind. No one in the house could have rest. So just imagine that, upstairs, her brother raving through alcohol. And some people even think that this is the origin for the idea of the mad woman in the attic, that famous plotline from Jane Eyre. Upstairs, there was this madman, her own brother.
Charlotte realised that Branwell would never be able to work and provide for the family. The sisters' prospects were bleak. But then Charlotte discovered several poems Emily had written, hidden in her desk. Emily was furious that her privacy had been invaded. But for the ambitious Charlotte, it was a eureka moment. Maybe the sisters could earn a living from writing. This was what brought Charlotte, Emily and Anne together, writing around the dining room table at the end of 1845. And within weeks, they weren't just writing poems, they'd embarked on their first novels.
It was kind of like an act of betrayal, wasn't it? But for Emily, you know, for Charlotte to go into this private world, she hated that, didn't she?
I do not want to be the sister who discovers her private poetry and goes, hey, just happened across this, I think we should publish.
No, Charlotte must have been scared. There must have been some sort of struggle going on.
Anne, as ever, is playing the peacemaker, really, because she sees what's kicking off over here and she goes, oh, I've got some poems too. And she doesn't mind publishing, so maybe that's what makes the possibility of publication a bit more palatable to Emily.
Charlotte, I think she from quite early on seemed to want to have some kind of external...
Some kind of public recognition,
recognition.
It was Charlotte who was both practical and wanting the recognition, but she somehow knew that Emily and Anne would fall in. Like, she must have known that, you know, if she could get this project going, that they would be behind her.
So what do you think it was that the spur for the Brontes decided to embark on novels?
It's such a perfect storm, because they're all suddenly at home for one reason or another. They've all got this great, I think, confidence in their talent, and now you've almost got nothing to lose.
They were looking to earn a living, weren't they? I mean, they needed money.
It's all coming together in a very Bronte-like, unhappy way.
It must have felt like a now or never situation, and that must have aided the speed with which they got going.
So where did the sisters find the confidence to produce in short order Emily's Wuthering Heights, Anne's Agnes Grey, and Charlotte's Jane Eyre? Well, the Brontes had long been writing for their own pleasure. They were practised, if unpublished, authors. And the sisters had a genius for drawing inspiration from their own lives. So what secrets of the Brontes' writing can we learn from exploring their childhoods? One of the most shocking parts of Jane Eyre is the story of her school days. But how much does it owe to reality? I've come to Cowan Bridge in Lancashire, where Charlotte was sent away to boarding school at the age of 8.
Beware, lest your God, the Most High, rise up in judgment and condemns you.
The school was founded by William Carus Wilson, a religious zealot who imposed a harsh regime on his pupils, including Charlotte, Emily, and their elder sisters, Maria and Elizabeth. This is one of Wilson's actual sermons, and it's reminiscent of the kind of teaching to which Jane Eyre is subjected.
For he examines us as to the integrity and strength of that hope.
It must have been terrifying for them. Can you imagine hearing that as a small child?
There is no hope. There is no hope of salvation, but through the blood shedding and the imputed.
I'm going to meet Marianne Thorme-Allen, who's studied the school's regime.
Mr. Wilson's religion was very much a hellfire religion and a death religion. He had this idea that it was better for a child to die young before he or she had had a chance to commit a multitude of sins.
It really was a brutal place, wasn't it?
It really was. The physical conditions were terrible, cold and dark, and these children were permanently semi-starved.
Their father wanted the best for his girls.
Oh, absolutely.
But it ended in tragedy.
Yes, indeed. The two elder girls fell ill at school and were sent home to die, basically. Maria after a few months, Elizabeth after a few weeks.
It seems clear that Charlotte later reimagined her sisters' deaths in the passage where Jane Eyre's school friend Helen dies in her arms.
That last fit of coughing has tired me a little. I feel as if I could sleep. But don't leave me, Jane. I like to have you near me. I'll stay with you, dear Helen. No one shall take me away.
The only sister who didn't experience the horrors of Cowan Bridge was the youngest, Anne. But even at home, she couldn't escape the shadow of death.
I mean, the thing about the parsonage, as everyone knows, is that obviously it looks out onto that extraordinary landscape of the moors.
But the front of the house faces a bleaker prospect. It's Haworth, an industrialising mill town, and almost right outside the door is the local graveyard.
At one point, 6 or 7 people were being buried a day, which is no surprise in a town where the child mortality rate was 40%. 40% of children died before the age of 6.
In the industrial north, growth always came at a price. But the price Haworth paid seems to have been particularly high.
The 1845, what's Haworth like?
It's a bustling little mill town. It's not completely modern. It's not like Manchester, one of the shock cities of the age. But it is industrialising. There are 3 mills in the town. So it's growing in population. It grows quite substantially over the period.
But no great hopes, presumably, that the infrastructure is going to keep up with that kind of expansion?
No, not at all, exactly. There are privies. There's no running water. And the privies are just these open public conveniences, up to 24 families sharing one privy. Some of them are in public view. One is placed on an eminence at the top of the high street. So there might be dozens of people all using this earth privy, visible to everybody around them. And this is the world that the sisters will be walking past on a daily basis.
What are the mortality rates like then in this filthy town?
They're shocking. The average age of death is about 25 or 26.
Really?
So the Brontes live into their late 20s, and in a way they get beyond the average at that age. So
I'm going to have to take a moment there to start to rejig my notions of the Brontes as the lucky ones.
But the Bronte children found somewhere to escape from this harsh reality. Between them, Charlotte, Branwell, Emily and Anne created their own fantasy world. It was inspired by a set of toy soldiers that Branwell had been given by their father. The children played with the soldiers out on the moors, inventing stories about them and drawing detailed maps like this one.
Soon, the piles of bleeding wretches rose under our feet. We trampled remorselessly upon friend and enemy.
Inspired by the popular periodicals of the day, they wrote up some of their stories in an unusual format.
So, this is one of the tiny books. They wrote these little books. They were magazines made for the toy soldiers. So basically, they were intended for them to read. So if you can see,
that's why they were so tiny in the first place. Right?
So you can see here how small.
Astonishing. Do you see, that gives me goosebumps. 1830.
Yeah.
Charlotte Brontë. Isn't that incredible?
Well, are they writing with quill pens?
Yes.
That's insane.
So
that's just
it's
physically
it's
impossible.
amazing, isn't it?
They're completely uninhibited in front of each other, aren't they, when it comes to writing?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think it really helped the fact that they were siblings, because I think the sibling rivalry played the major part in it, that even though there was this close connection, there was this sense of powering on through this saga because they wanted to get one over on one another.
So you think they're the sort of perfect mixture of security and spurt?
Exactly.
The children christened their imaginary realm Glasstown. The stories were influenced by the adult periodicals they all read. Some are surprisingly graphic.
So you have obviously themes of war, Branwell's violent battle sagas, which are hideous to read in all ways because it's like a stream of consciousness.
Listen what a roar, hideously broken and rattling and deep and trembling. I close my eyes.
And also Charlotte as well, in terms of the way that the men are presented as well. They're very tyrannous, they're sexually alluring.
The full, dark, refulgent eye lightens most gloriously. Suddenly he lifts his head and stands erect and godlike.
And do you think this character prefigures some of the characters in her adult fiction?
Certainly.
Mr. Rochester, for example.
Certainly in terms of command and presence and almost, brutish masculinity. It certainly forms in the juvenilia.
Emily and Anne went on to create a separate world of their own, ruled by women, called Gondal.
I dream of moor and misty hill, where evening closes dark and chill. For lone among the mountains cold lie those that I have loved of old.
How important was Gondal to Emily?
I would say it's incredibly important. And I don't think that she ever broke away from her world of Gondal. Even when she was writing Wuthering Heights.
Yeah,
so much of Gondal fed into Wuthering Heights, all the themes such as exile, death, imprisonment, separation from loved ones. All of these are staple themes of Wuthering Heights.
Intrigued, Helen and I try writing our own little books.
Have you ever written with one of these before?
No.
Well, let's learn trying to do it in this kind of tiny, without blotting. That's what all the kind of Victorian girls got into trouble for, didn't it?
Oh,
It was ink blots.
Blotting coffee book.
Blotting your coffee book.
Well, I started with a blot.
Yeah, me too.
Every letter is a blot.
Yeah.
So scratching is causing some tension for me.
I used to create little books, actually.
Did you?
At a doll's house. I loved the idea of doing it. It's really fun. It's just come back to me. Oh, another blot.
The Brontes' imaginary worlds were rooted in the reality of the moors that surrounded Haworth. And the sisters carried on their childhood passion for walking and exploring the moors through to adulthood.
There are great moors behind and on each hand of me. There are waves of mountains far beyond that deep valley at my feet.
On one side of the road rose a high, rough bank, where hazels and stunted oaks, with their roots half exposed, held uncertain tenure, and strong winds had blown some nearly horizontal.
We're going to retrace one of the sisters' favourite walks to the waterfall near Pondon Kirk, using a map from the time.
Do not want to get lost on the moors.
That's the spirit, Emily.
Oh, this map's not going to
Oh, that wind! Ah! They wouldn't have needed maps, would they? They'd have known this landscape so intimately. They walked it, tramped it for hours and hours.
No idea how they managed it in gale forces like this.
Why do I feel we're not quite as hardy as the Bronte sisters?
And we've got all the kit as well. They were out here in skirts and hobnail boots at best.
It would have been so liberating for them if you think of the kind of constraints they were under, you know, the world of corsets and
it kind of makes you want to race around now and shout and scream now, doesn't it? Can you imagine if you come out of the parsonage?
Yeah.
I wish I were out of doors. I wish I were a girl again, half savage and hardy and free. I'm sure I should be myself were I once among the heather on those hills.
Do you remember that wonderful scene in Jane Eyre, she's escaping from Rochester, and she spends the night on the moors, and, you know, at her wit's end. And I think, you know, even on a day like this, they're bleak. The idea of spending the night was extraordinary, but for her, the moors were a place of sanctuary. She talks about it, the moor being her mother, giving her a place of refuge and safety.
Anne's got a poem about the wind on the moors as well. I think it's the same when she lies on the pathless moor and she can listen to the wind and she can start to understand its language. I'm not going to lie down, but I sort of see what she means.
The moors as refuge, the moors as a companion that speaks a language that only you understand. It's no wonder that the sisters loved being out here. Oh, there's a waterfall.
Wow, lovely, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Feels so remote and so wild, isn't it?
So for all their apparently sheltered lives, Charlotte, Emily and Anne already had a rich body of early experience to summon up when they embarked on their first novels. But during the winter of 1845, as the sisters huddled round the dining room table, their writing could also draw on more recent events in their lives. With no money at home, all three had been obliged to leave to earn a living. How did those experiences influence their work? Anne, the youngest sister, spent the longest time in full employment, even though her career options were somewhat limited.
Wanted a governess, not under 25 years of age, who is competent to teach French, music, dancing and the rudiments of Italian. Ladies expecting a high salary need not apply. Best to get it out there, I think. Saves time wasted. It was the 1840s and I was a middle-class, reasonably well-educated young woman. This is all that's open to me. I can't be a doctor, I can't be a lawyer, I can't go to university because they're too expensive and they're only for the men. I could become an actress, but that's practically synonymous with being a prostitute.
So I've come to Audley End in Essex, where I'm told a 19th century governess's room still exists. It's interesting that both Anne and Charlotte worked as governesses like their heroines in Jane Eyre and Anne's first novel, Agnes Grey. Agnes is a high-minded daughter of a clergyman who becomes a governess so that she can make her own way in the world. She gets a brutal awakening when working for two families, the Bloomfields and the Murrays.
If you're Anne and you're confronted with this pile, you can't help but, I think, look at something like this and think, that's a place for stories. But at the same time, as on a sort of human 19-year-old girl level, that's an intimidating prospect. Poor Anne, I think. Poor Anne. So, this is the governess's bedroom. It's right next to the nursery. They're all just on the other side of that thin little wall there. And she's got this fetching number. Oh, it's quite a weight. It's not designed for you to express your personality through this sort of single concession to femininity here with this little lace collar. But basically, it's to make you into something between an official servant and invisible, you know, or at least anonymous.
I think Anne was exquisitely attuned to the politics of wealth and class. As a governess, Agnes Grey basically goes from being a middle-class woman to a domestic servant, and she has to project a particular kind of image to keep her employers happy.
OK, so it's 1840-something, my parents have just lost everything, and they're booting me out to work. I suppose what I need to know is, would the ability to quote Victoria Wood appropriately do me any good at all? Because that's my only skill.
I suspect not. No. I suspect that's quite a niche market. Can you speak conversational French?
Non.
Little bit of German?
Nine.
Rudiments of Italian?
It's not even no. Ciao? I don't know. No.
Piano?
No.
Drawing?
No.
Do you have a mild and pleasing disposition?
I could fake one long enough to get a job, I think.
I think that's the thing that really... I mean, if you look at these ads, a lot of them, apart from all the rudimentary Latin and the advanced Italian, always stress mild and pleasing. Because mothers seem to have a real terror that they're going to let in a governess to the house who's going to be very, very strict with the children.
I was going to ask you about this because, reading especially the first section of Agnes Grey will almost give you a stroke. It's so awful because she's got no power. The parents basically forbid her to punish the children. Is this standard practice?
Well, it certainly was what Anne Brontë found when she went to work for the Ingham family, who are widely supposed to be the models for the Bloomfields. She was told, no, if they play up, come and see me, which she tried a couple of times, whereupon Mrs. Bloomfield said, I'm sorry, they are delightful. They are delightful.
While receiving my instructions, they would lounge upon the sofa, lie on the rug, stretch, yawn, talk to each other or look out of the window. Whereas I could not so much as stir the fire or pick up the handkerchief I had dropped without being rebuked for inattention, or told that Mamma would not like me to be so careless.
There's a fascinating moment, actually, in Anne Bronte's life where she really messed up. Was one day her charges were being so unpleasant, so difficult, that she tied them to a table leg. And at that point, their mother came in. And let's just put it like this, her services weren't required for much longer after that.
It's always that one moment when you tie them to the chair leg that the mother comes in, isn't it? Always.
What did you think when I said, let's try the dress on?
I thought no, but you know, now that I'm in it, I feel very comfortable in this. I'm very happy. It's sparking something deep within me. It's you know, there's not much you can do in a plain black governess's uniform than just go about your business, your legitimate, very legitimate business. And of course, it's just got that very unmodern feeling of holding you in and upright. You know, you're not here to slouch about and be comfortable in this life. You're here to be upstanding. I think I look oddly well in it.
Anne wrote a novel which gave a voice to the voiceless. Governesses were supposed to be seen and not heard. This book showed women that work outside the home was possible. At least it was until your brother Branwell got involved. Branwell joined Anne to be a tutor to the same family, but had an affair with their mother. So Anne felt she had to leave. She and Branwell both went back to Haworth, where Branwell proceeded to drown his sorrows in drink, and decent, hard-working Anne was out of a job.
One sister, however, was very happy to be at home, Emily. Her brief foray working as a school teacher had ended in illness, possibly a breakdown. Back in Haworth, Emily ran the household for her father. And as well as the normal chores of cooking and cleaning, she had a rather unusual responsibility. The pistol belonged to the sister's father, the Reverend Patrick Brontë, who kept it handy just in case of any trouble from rioting mill workers. It was Emily's job to discharge, clean and reload the weapon.
Emily was the only Brontë sibling that their father instructed in firing of a pistol, and I can see how she would have really loved this. It must have provided a spark, a moment of real excitement in an otherwise relentless day of household tasks from morning till dusk, which is not to say that the routines weren't useful to Emily's imagination as well. I'm here in the kitchen at the parsonage, where Emily would have made many, many loaves of bread, probably treating the dough a lot more roughly than I am at the moment. And I'm thinking about the ritual that she would have gone through of keeping a household running, the sort of storylines and the characters and the dialogue between the characters that would have been playing out in her head at exactly the same time. So there's simultaneous magic in a way. A lot of her drama takes place within the home. Someone can be making bread and somebody else can be plotting murder. In Wuthering Heights, Emily shows us that the domestic sphere can be as volatile and strange and sometimes frightening, at least in its intensity, as it can be out on the moors. I'm going to spend the night at the parsonage and try to access Emily's conception of home. I'm about to go to sleep here, and I'm trying to be calm. The wind has been so strong. It's literally been wuthering around the house, and yeah, walking past the front door, it felt as if somebody was trying to get in, and I'm trying to not think in that way. Our first encounter with the heroine of Wuthering Heights is with Cathy's ghost, a child ghost scratching at the windows of a house, longing to be let in. There's something so shocking about the tangibility of that ghost, and that's something that's influenced the way that I tell stories myself.
The intense horror of
nightmare came over me. I tried to draw back my arm, but the hand clung to it, and a most melancholy voice sobbed, "Let me in. Let me in."
It's about 7 a.m. I had a really strange night. Don't think I really slept. It felt like I was seeing things, but even now if you ask me what I was seeing, I couldn't tell you. I know Emily in particular, as Charlotte writes, was very, very reluctant to leave this life, which might have been part of the reason why I was nervous before, because I thought, oh, she might want to stick around the house, even in the next life. And you know, her characters in Wuthering Heights reject heaven. They would rather stay here. One of the most rebellious figures in Wuthering Heights is Heathcliff. He's full of violence and anger, but then there's this great bond and the great love between him and Cathy that really he's helpless before. Topwithens is said to be one of the inspirations for Wuthering Heights, the house where Heathcliff lives in the story. So there's something really atmospheric and suitably gothic about meeting a fellow Heathcliff fan in this ruined farmhouse.
I read Wuthering Heights, I must have been 16 or 17, and I was besotted with Heathcliff. And I've never really got over it.
Is Heathcliff a villain or something more interesting?
In the narrative's descriptions of Heathcliff, there's something to suggest that he may not even be human, that he's a fiend, a devil. He operates on a different level to any other character in a novel.
It's his nature, in the way that it's the nature of the moors to destroy you if you're lost out here after dark.
Absolutely. Once we read between the lines, I think we can see Frankenstein. We look at what happens to Frankenstein's creature. He's neglected by his creator, and eventually he takes his revenge on mankind. And Heathcliff does something very similar. He's neglected and abused, and ultimately he exacts his revenge.
I have no pity. I have no pity. The more the worms writhe, the more I yearn to crush out their entrails. It is a moral teething, and I grind with greater energy in proportion to the increase of pain.
But, and I think this is what Emily Brontë does wonderfully, in the midst of all this, he remains the novel's romantic lead. It's so contradictory, but it works so well. And he's just driven by this passion for Catherine and this desire for revenge.
Cathy seems to be the only other character in the novel who understands Heathcliff. There is the declaration she makes where she says, "I am Heathcliff," and they are one character broken into two separate bodies, and they spend the story trying to come back together.
One of the most wonderful things of the book, and culminates in the bodies decomposing together because he's removed the sides of the coffins. So she literally becomes Heathcliff.
By importing exotic Gothic elements into an everyday Yorkshire setting, Emily broke new ground, transforming the familiar into somewhere timeless and strange. However, Charlotte, like Anne, drew on her experiences of the real world, which had taken her even further afield than England. Charlotte was desperate to escape the confines of home. She argued that she needed to learn French in order to set up her own school, and so she came here to Brussels in 1842. Really, it was the pretext for an adventure, but she didn't realise that this journey would change her life.
When I normally come to Brussels, it's for an EU summit, which is not exactly the most exotic of occasions. But for Charlotte, this city was hugely romantic, a world away from the parsonage in Haworth. She came to live at the Pensionnat Eyre, and she lived in the same house as her professor, who she described at first as an insane tomcat, a delirious hyena.
To begin with, Charlotte and Constantin Eyre clashed, sparring with one another in lessons. But he knew she had talent and encouraged her writing. Charlotte had never received this kind of attention from such a cultured and educated man before. Her reaction was perhaps predictable, but catastrophic. She found herself falling in love with her married professor. Her intense feelings scared Charlotte so much that she was driven to come to this cathedral.
I actually did confess, a real confession. That's what Charlotte wrote to Emily. And she had to press the priest to hear her. After all, she wasn't a Catholic herself. What was it that she was so desperate for him to hear? Well, she was unhappily in love with a married man and had nobody really to talk to. So perhaps this was the only way that she could unburden herself of those guilty feelings.
I'm curious to find out more about Monsieur Heger and why Charlotte became so infatuated with him. I'm going to meet François Fierens.
Bonjour. Ravi de vous rencontrer.
Monsieur Heger's great-great-great-grandson.
Well, there is a famous family portrait here.
You can see he's got quite passionate eyes.
I have other portraits of him here.
This is him in later life.
Yes.
Oh, yes, so I can see there.
Even later.
Oh, no, I like that. You can see a kind of sense of humour there.
Yes, exactly,
exactly.
Yes,
he's glinting
yes,
at the camera
yes.
in quite a mischievous way.
Clever, smiling. He had a lot of humour.
So do you think that he had quite a profound effect on the way she went on to write her novels?
Charlotte believed in the genius of the artist, and Constantin Heger was more focused on the work to do.
The technique.
Yes,
he was very
yes,
strict
yes,
about
yes,
her and told her to discard what wasn't
Yes.
necessary.
But I can show you here the homeworks of Charlotte. And so
So this is actually written by Charlotte Brontë?
Yes, yes. So
oh, wonderful.
you can see that these devoirs were corrected by Constantin Heger.
And is he correcting just the French or actually the writing style
The
as well?
writing style, the expression. The pupils were expected to participate themselves actively in their own education. It was not just receive an information, by developing their own and personal views.
He provoked something very passionate, didn't he, within her? So what do you think really went on between the pair of them?
Constantin Heger was very happy in his family life. Charlotte was rather isolated, not very connected with the other teachers of the school, and rather alone.
So Charlotte went back home to live in England, and then all these letters started, didn't they? These sort of outpouring of very passionate letters.
Day and night, I find neither rest nor peace. If I sleep, I have tormenting dreams in which I see you, always severe, always grave and angry with me.
What do you think happened when they arrived in Brussels? What would that have meant to Monsieur Heger?
I don't know. Frankly, I don't know. He answered the first letters once or maybe twice, and thereafter his reaction was not to answer after, because the letters became so exaggerated, passionated, and he probably considered that the best thing to do was not to answer.
Your last letter has sustained me, has nourished me for 6 months. Now I need another, and you will give it to me.
Charlotte was so obsessed by her one-sided love affair with Monsieur Heger that it became the focus of her first novel, which wasn't Jane Eyre. It was called The Professor. Charlotte wrote it in the male first person, the voice of the professor himself, who eventually falls in love with a shy, plain, but good-hearted pupil. Sound familiar? It was, of course, a consoling fantasy for Charlotte in the face of all her unanswered letters. By spring 1846, the sisters were putting the finishing touches to their novels. The flurry of nightly activity around the dining room table produced 3 books in less than 6 months. Agnes Grey, Wuthering Heights, and The Professor. Charlotte was already sounding out potential publishers. In deference to Emily's wish for privacy, the sisters adopted pseudonyms. The Brontes became Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell, concealing their identities and even their gender from the publishers. After several rejections, the Brontes had a breakthrough. Well, at least Emily and Anne did. In 1847, Wuthering Heights and Agnes Grey were accepted for publication together in 1 volume. But Charlotte's The Professor was rejected everywhere.
Well, look, here they are. And it must have been such a moment when they arrived. Here, actually, isn't it? Here at the parsonage.
Yep. And here's Wuthering Heights.
Could you just check that Agnes Grey is in the back of that?
I'll have a look in my younger time.
To poor Charlotte, she sent off the books for publication.
Yes, she should still be waiting. Let me that back.
Yeah, exactly. She had to wait. So, you know, can you imagine? So Emily's book and Anne's book were accepted by the publishers, but hers was rejected. And she'd been the one who'd pushed the publishing idea. She'd be the one so certain that her writing would be loved by the world. And then to have the 2 younger sisters.
And also I feel so sorry for, because they're all the first novels are sort of cri de coeur, aren't they? Including, you know, Wuthering Heights is just something Emily had to get out of her. It's just, it's her thing.
Yeah.
You've got Agnes Grey, which is therapy for Anne, getting rid of all these children she had to look after. And The Professor, of course, is Charlotte's poor, beaten, broken heart over Monsieur Auger.
Yes, her tutor in
and yet
Brussels.
it gets rejected, whereas the others go, oh, yeah.
I actually think the problem with The Professor was the wish fulfillment, though. Because you have it written as if she writes it as if she was her professor who had fallen in love with her, and everything works out fine. It seems like it's something she had to take time on and transform those same feelings and transport them into Jane Eyre in a sense. So she just needed more time.
Although I don't think The Professor is quite as bad as everybody makes it out to be. I really don't.
Make your case.
OK, all right, OK, I'll make my case. I think one of the things that people underestimate with Charlotte Brontë is her quite kind of waspish humour. And she's so bitchy about the pupils in the school. I mean, that's very kind of heartfelt about it.
I tell you what, I do admire Charlotte for, after the Professor's been rejected, still ploughing on. And the mere fact of continuing once you've had your first book rejected. I mean, when I get even a piece rejected or marked heavily, I'm just destroyed for a week.
You know, I don't think she was the kind of person who was deterred by things. I mean, she had such determination of spirit.
Charlotte had already been working on a second novel. As if realising that she was capable of much more than The Professor, she'd gone back to the drawing board, creating this time a female protagonist, Jane Eyre, with a richly detailed biography that drew on Charlotte's own life, including her school days.
All are equally guilty before the Most High.
Her experiences as a governess, and, inevitably, her love for an older man with an inconvenient wife. And crucially, Charlotte declared that her heroine would be as plain and as small as myself. Charlotte was just 4 foot 11 inches tall. I've been given the rare chance to examine an extraordinary and very personal object. Will it shed more light on Charlotte's self-image?
We've got a real treasure here. It's Charlotte Bronte's corset. And not one that I think Charlotte would have been very pleased for us to have on display. I think, rightly, there's the feeling that it's a very intimate garment that shouldn't just be, you know, thrown about.
What do you think it tells us about Charlotte?
Well, I think in terms of the physicality of the piece, it shows us that she was very, very small, because I think you can see how tiny she was. And we think around a UK size 2, which, if you think about that, is very, very small.
I mean, that's like a child,
It
isn't it?
It is like a child. And certainly when it was tightly laced, which we know Charlotte did tightly lace, it would have had about an 18.5-inch waist. If we just lift it up.
Why would somebody who was so slight be corseting themselves anyway?
Perhaps she felt the need to keep herself in, to have a sense of control. And it's quite a punitive piece in some senses. You look at this and you can just see you've got a big iron busk up the front. It's quite a harsh corset. There's no give. If you'd had wood or ivory, there, as your body warmed up, it would have given you a little bit more movement, but iron is unyielding.
It is one of the very striking things about Jane Eyre, isn't it? This small, slight, plain individual, but with such a force of personality, such an inner strength.
I think that's so true. And I think the corset speaks to me of that actually in Charlotte as well, because one of the reasons perhaps Charlotte felt the need to be so tightly laced is because there was this inner fire within her that she was perhaps afraid would come out.
Charlotte now had a heroine whom she could write about with supreme insight and empathy. But she needed a compelling male figure to match Jane, a romantic interest who wasn't simply a fictionalised Monsieur Heger. Once again, Charlotte turned to her life for inspiration. But this time she drew on the most immediate crisis that the sisters faced. Their father, Patrick Brontë, was now practically blind. Surgery on his cataracts was extremely risky, but Patrick was desperate. In July 1846, he and Charlotte travelled to Manchester. There, the cataracts were literally cut out of Patrick's eyes without anaesthetic. Meanwhile, Charlotte sat by his bedside, writing away.
So during this fraught time when she was so worried about her father and actually was suffering from raging toothache herself, which kept her up at night, what did Charlotte do? She writes the character of Mr. Rochester, blinded in the fire, and then regaining his sight. It's almost as if it was a form of wish fulfillment.
Charlotte added a whole new dimension to Rochester's character and to the novel. Patrick's operation was a success, and just 6 weeks later, he was back home at the parsonage, where Charlotte finished Jane Eyre. She sent off the novel to a small London publishing house. They snapped it up. Jane Eyre, by Currer Bell, Charlotte's pseudonym, came off the press on the 19th of October, 1847. By Christmas, it, Wuthering Heights and Agnes Grey were all on sale at bookshops like this in London and throughout the country. We've come here to learn more about the huge and immediate impact made by the Brontes, or rather, Currer, Ellis and Acton Bell.
It must have been so strange for them, having written it all in their enclosed little world in the parsonage, and then suddenly having strangers perusing their work and making judgments.
A review of Agnes Grey said, "Oh, Acton Bell must have bribed a governess with either money or love to have got such detail of her prison from her." I say, yeah, or just stay with me here. I think horses, not zebras. It could have been a woman, but no.
There was one I liked, which actually was by a woman reviewer, and she said about Jane Eyre that if it wasn't written by a man, then it must have been written by a sexual delinquent. But, I suppose for the time, there were shocking elements in it. Rochester wants to make Jane Eyre his mistress and set her up in what sounds rather nice, a house in the south of France.
Master.
I'm not sure I'd have run away, but anyway.
I think this review sort of sums up what it was that people found so distasteful. It says the Bells, do not turn away from dwelling upon those physical acts of cruelty which true taste rejects. It's as if they're saying, leave those skeletons in the closet, don't bring them into nice people's homes.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Up till now, the novel's been, very middle class, kind of genteel pastime and form, and all of a sudden the Brontes come along and say, actually, you could do this with it as well. I mean, that's the genie out of the bottle, isn't it?
By modern standards, we could end the Brontë sisters' story here, and it would be a happy ending. But at a time when women's economic situations were precarious and death always seemed just around the corner, a happy ending for the Brontes meant two things: marriage and survival. We've returned to Haworth for a one-off event, a reenactment of the only Brontë sibling wedding, a bittersweet occasion for the family. Less than a year after his sister's great success, Branwell had collapsed and died in an alcohol-induced fit. He'd drawn this prophetic image not long before. Then at his funeral, just weeks later, Emily developed tuberculosis. She died 3 months after Branwell. Anne's death, also from tuberculosis, came the following year. In barely 8 months, Charlotte had lost all of her surviving siblings. She sought comfort with someone who'd always been there in the background, with someone who'd long been quietly devoted to her, her father's curate, Arthur Bell Nichols. But their wedding would take place without any of Charlotte's family being present. The match had initially been opposed by her father Patrick, who worried that Arthur was after Charlotte's money. On the eve of the wedding, the Reverend Brontë decided he wasn't up to giving Charlotte away. So the wedding went ahead without him.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered together here in the sight of God to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony.
I suppose what I've learnt from the time that we've spent up here in the Haworth Parsonage and looking at their lives is that even though physically she was so frail and so tiny and so insecure about her own appearance, inside there was an extraordinary, powerful, strong personality that dominated her sisters and pushed towards publication of the books and towards one of the greatest books written in the English language.
To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish.
I think coming here, I sort of expected to find a sort of boundary or gateway between their hometown and the worlds that each of the three sisters stepped off into. But actually, they've become more mysterious to me in a lot of ways. I feel as if you can only follow them up to a certain point.
I will.
The amazing thing about all three of them is that they've got these quite frail bodies that obviously give up on them too early. But, they're housing these indomitable wills and extraordinary talents. It's such a dichotomy. It breeds the myth